There is a video that field researchers in Amboseli, Kenya, filmed in 2013. An elephant family, moving across the savannah, stops without warning. The matriarch walks toward a set of bones half buried in the dry ground. She slows as she approaches. She extends her trunk and touches the skull, running the tip along the curve of the bone slowly, the way you would trace something you were trying to remember. The other elephants gather around her. They touch the bones too. Nobody makes a sound. They stay for 11 minutes before moving on. The bones belonged to an elephant that had died 2 years earlier. This was not the first time this family had stopped at this exact spot. Most people assume animals don't understand death. They assume that when an animal loses a companion, what registers is absence, a missing presence in the environment, a gap in the social structure, not the concept of what that absence means. The research from the last 2 decades suggests that assumption is wrong, not slightly wrong, fundamentally wrong in ways that force a much harder question. If animals understand death, then understanding death is not what separates us from them. And if it doesn't separate us, we need to look very carefully at what we've been using it to justify. The difficulty is measurement. Death awareness is not a behavior you can observe directly. You cannot look at an animal and see comprehension. What researchers can measure is behavior that only makes sense if the animal has some model of death operating in the background. A set of responses that serve no survival function, that don't reduce threat, don't acquire food, don't improve reproductive outcomes, but happen anyway, repeatedly, across individuals, across species. Documented in controlled conditions by researchers who spent years trying to find the simpler explanation first, and couldn't. Start with crows. In 2015, Kaylee Swift at the University of Washington published findings from a study that became one of the most cited pieces of research in animal death awareness literature. She presented wild crows with a dead crow placed in their environment by a researcher wearing a specific mask. The crows responded with alarm calls, but that was expected. What wasn't expected was what happened next. The crows began recruiting other crows to the site. They formed a group around the body. They called loudly together, circling, landing nearby, departing, returning. Some researchers had been calling this behavior a funeral. Swift was careful with that word. What she documented was that the crows were not simply alarmed. They were doing something organized and social around the dead, something that served no obvious individual survival function. The behavior has since been documented across multiple corvid species in multiple countries. It happens consistently. It happens even when the dead crow is a stranger, an individual the responding crows had no prior relationship with. The crows are not mourning a companion. They are responding to the category of dead crow. They have a category for it. What makes a category possible is representation. To have a category for dead crow, the crow brain must be able to distinguish between a live crow and dead crow as fundamentally different states, not just different behaviors. A live crow moves, dead crow doesn't, but so does a rock. What separates dead crow from rock in the crow's classification is that dead crow was once a live crow. The crow brain must be tracking that transition. Researchers believe this is exactly what is happening. Crows have large forebrains relative to their body size, neural architecture that in other species correlates with abstract concept formation. They plan for the future, recognize themselves in mirrors, use tools, and hold grudges across years. A brain capable of all of that is a brain capable of modeling what alive means, and therefore what the end of alive means. Chimpanzees push this further. In 2011, a research team in Amboseli, Guinea, documented something that had been reported anecdotally for decades, but never rigorously studied. A female chimpanzee named Jire was carrying her dead infant. The infant had died from a respiratory illness 3 days earlier. Jire carried the body for 27 days. She groomed it. She chased flies away from it. She made her sleeping nest each night, with the body placed beside her. When researchers eventually recovered the body for examination, they found the infant had partially mummified. Jire had continued performing the behaviors of motherhood on something that could no longer respond to any of them. The simpler explanation is that Jire did not understand the infant was dead. that she was simply continuing ingrained maternal behaviors, because the trigger for stopping, a live infant that no longer needed her, was absent. Some researchers hold this position, but there is a detail that complicates it. As the days passed, Jire's behavior changed. She groomed the body less frequently.
She carried it differently, less centrally, more to the side. She made less eye contact with it.
The behaviors associated with caring for a live infant gradually withdrew. Something was updating. Whatever model she held of the infant was shifting over time in a direction that only makes sense if she had some representation of what dead means, and was slowly reconciling the body in her arms with it. Elephants are the species where the evidence accumulates most heavily. Karen McComb at the University of Sussex has spent decades studying elephant responses to death and found a set of behaviors with no parallel in any other non-human animal. Elephants return to the bones of dead family members, not once, not randomly, but repeatedly, across years, sometimes across decades. They return specifically to family members' bones and respond with measurably less interest to the bones of unrelated elephants or other species. They are not attracted to bones generally. They are returning to specific individuals. They do this using their trunks, the same primary sensory organ they use to examine living companions. The trunk contains more than 40,000 individual muscles and a density of nerve endings comparable to human fingertips. When an elephant touches a bone with its trunk, it is examining it with its most sensitive instrument. Researchers have documented elephants touching the bones of deceased matriarchs for longer and more carefully than the bones of any other individual, including bones of elephants that held high social rank but were not family. The distinction is not status. It is relationship. The elephant is seeking something specific and finding it or not finding it in a way that only makes sense if it holds a model of who that individual was. The harder question is what that model contains.
Humans understand death partly because we understand time. We know that what is gone will not return. We know that we will also go. Whether elephants operate with any version of that second understanding is something the research has not settled. What it has documented is that elephants show measurable behavioral changes after losing a family member that persist for months. They are less active. They spend more time alone. They are more reactive to environmental threats. They eat less. These are not acute stress responses. They are prolonged patterns of changed behavior that researchers describe carefully as consistent with grief, while acknowledging that grief is a word that carries more than the data can confirm.
The question that sits underneath all of this is the one researchers approach most carefully. Does any animal understand that it will die? Not that death exists, not that others die, but that it specifically is going to. This is a different cognitive operation. It requires the ability to model the self as an object in the world, to project that self forward in time, and to apply the category of death to that projection. It requires what psychologists call a theory of mind, and it requires something beyond that, an ability to hold a future version of the self that doesn't exist and contemplate its absence. Great apes show evidence of both. They pass the mirror test, demonstrating self-recognition. They plan for future states they are not currently experiencing. Researchers have documented chimpanzees in terminal illness behaving in ways that suggest something has changed in how they orient toward their environment. Less investment in social competition, increased proximity seeking with longtime companions, a kind of narrowing. Whether this is an animal that knows it is dying, or an animal whose declining physiology is simply producing different behavioral outputs, is a question the data cannot currently answer. What the data can answer is this. Across species that share no common ancestor closer than 300 million years, the same suite of behaviors appears around death. Social gathering, extended contact with the body, return visits, prolonged behavioral change in survivors, responses that scale specifically with the closeness of the relationship, not just the fact of the death. These behaviors evolved independently in species with completely different brain architectures, in different environments, under different pressures. When the same solution appears across that much evolutionary distance, it typically means the solution is responding to the same problem. The problem is death, and these animals are not simply encountering it. They are doing something with it. The elephant in Amboseli that stood over the bones for 11 minutes and then walked away did not leave us a record of what was happening inside her. The crow that recruited its companions to stand over a stranger's body and call together did not file a report. What they left was behavior. Behavior that keeps happening across species, across continents, across generations, in animals that have never been taught what to do with the dead, and yet do something anyway. We assumed the weight of knowing about death was ours alone to carry. It turns out we may have been carrying it in company the entire time. We just never thought to look at who was walking beside us.